There are many ways of thinking about a revolution. I think one of the problems with the 20th century was that, at least until the uprisings against communism in the 1980s, it conflated revolution with a social revolution, a class struggle, which would redistribute material things. What that didn't pay attention to is the importance of a political revolution, which is a democratic revolution that mobilizes across classes for the sake of creating a more democratic, or just a democratic society. And so definitely what's been sweeping across the Arab world today in the Middle East, and particularly in North Africa, is a democratic revolution. And its most important parallel is what happened in Eastern Europe in the late 1980s. I think that revolutions, political revolutions especially, I think, happen in a kind of symbolic process of copying or iteration, that people they see something else happening and they think that's possible for us. They have a model in terms of performance and symbolic action and inspiration, and then they may be able to take that model inside of itself. So, for example, in the American Revolution in the 1770s and 80s had a tremendous rollover effect. It helped stimulate the French Revolution, and the French Revolution helped stimulate others. It provided rhetoric and models. What's happening in the year, what happened in the year 2011 is a tremendous appropriation of the model of democratic revolution by activists, secular and religious, in the Middle East. First in Tunisia, which just had its own parliamentary elections yesterday and the day before, and especially in Egypt, which is the most important, the largest population, the most influential country. And then the success of this people's mobilization in Egypt not only spread this model of a cross-class people's uprising to other Arabic countries, and was highly stimulating and energizing, but it seemed to spread throughout Europe and the United States. And so that if you look at Western Europe and the United States, you see that for 3 years of budget cutting and economic crisis, there was no left-wing reaction. There was no liberal, in our parlance in the United States, no liberal uprising. And to the contrary, social democrats and liberals felt that they were resigned, they felt helpless, and it was the right-wing movements like the Tea Party that seemed vitalized by this whole process. But I think as a result of Egypt and the Arab Spring, as it's called, there actually were reactions that began in Spain, in Madrid and Barcelona earlier this year, which then had reverberations in London, and peace protests, protests for justice in Israel. Earlier this year, there were big demonstrations and occupations in Madison, Wisconsin against the proposed budget cuts by the governor of Wisconsin. And finally, about six weeks ago, there began to be this Occupy Wall Street movement, which electrified and set off new rounds of, I would say, copying and replication throughout the United States and Europe and elsewhere. So I do think that this process has been a very demonstrative one, very theatrical, that the audience for the performances have turned themselves into actors. Yes and no. The social media allow a very rapid communication of anything that's happening. And it brings audiences well outside of the immediate context into an intense relationship with political performances. The fact that the Egypt revolution had such widespread effect throughout the Arab world and then had these knock-on effects all over Europe and the US is partly the effect of the social media during the revolution, first, because the Facebook page, We Are All Khalid Said, which the movement started, was in English and Arabic. And there were millions of people who followed the English Facebook, which was 24/7 images and messages. So the impact of the social media allowed global civil society to be very much involved as fused spectators with this movement. And in that respect, the technology of social media definitely was a very unique factor in this upheaval. At the same time, you don't want to confuse the medium with the message. Social media by themselves don't create revolutions. You need ideology, you need culture, and you can't forget the role of what I call carrier groups of leadership and of intellectuals and of cultural changes. And in the Egyptian case and the other Arab Spring cases, there had been at least a decade of intellectual discussion of democracy. There had been a change of Islam towards much of Islam embracing more moderate, more democratic ideas in reaction against Islamicism and terrorism and theocratic dictatorship in Iran. So these cultural transformations were what was carried by the social media. So it's the medium and the message need to work together.